Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really zoom in on what feels like a modern playbook for getting ahead professionally. We're looking at how someone navigated three huge moves, both geographically and in their career. Think Shanghai, then Tokyo, then New York, all in about 10 years. So our mission here is to kind of unpack the story we found in this personal interview. It details this whole journey. We want to pull out the core strategy, the repeatable bits used by our subject. He's a data engineer at Google now, goes by FY. How did he manage these massive shifts, these international moves, without some rigid 20-year master plan? What was the actual, tactical approach?
Yeah, it's fascinating. What jumps out right away from the material is that FY, he seems ambitious, definitely, but it's tempered by this really strategic short-term thinking. Like you said, former Shanghai high school kid, spent a crucial decade in Japan, and now he's in this high-leverage role in New York. And the secret sauce, well, it doesn't seem to be some amazing foresight. It really looks like rigorous, super focused execution on these sequential, clear, 3-year goals.
That idea, structured fluidity, that's really interesting already. And, the story starts with something a bit surprising, almost counterintuitive about his early life. You hear these stories, right? About the insane academic pressure in Chinese high schools.
Oh, yeah, the intensity.
But FY's experience, at least in Shanghai, sounds remarkably balanced. He even pointed out that while kids in other big provinces might be hitting the books until 10 p.m.
It was usually done by 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, which really says something about, I guess, the regional differences in that pressure cooker.
It really does.
Yeah?
And get this, he wasn't even a local Shanghai resident. He was an out-of-town science student, admitted under some specific policy, living on his own in a dorm. And yet, he still had time for things outside of just studying.
A pretty well-rounded high school life, actually, considering that independent setup. He mentioned this great basketball court they had, plastic surface.
Sounds nice.
And he said he was out there playing for an hour or two almost every day after class is finished. That kind of non-traditional, almost, dare I say, relaxed start, it feels like it might be foundational for how comfortable he was making big jumps later on.
Well, and if you connect that to the mindset you need for, moving internationally, that comfort with transition seems to have started way earlier for him. His family moved around because of his parents' work, in the petroleum sector. He'd lived in Xinjiang, Beijing. So this apparently built up this sort of baseline mindset of not resisting going to completely unfamiliar cities.
Okay. So when the chance came later to pack up for Tokyo, or then New York, maybe that internal hurdle was already lower. He'd always been kind of mobile.
Exactly. And he really cemented that independent streak early on by deciding not to follow the family path.
Right. His dad was with Sinopec, the big petroleum company. That's a classic, stable career track.
A very standard path.
Yeah.
But FY apparently just crossed that whole field off his list from the get-go.
And this seems like a key moment, the parental reaction.
Huge. His father wasn't just okay with it. He was apparently quite open-minded, even encouraged him. Told him natural resources might not be the future for his generation anyway. The advice was pretty straightforward. Study what you like, just don't break the law.
Wow. That lack of pressure, that freedom to follow genuine interest must have been huge.
Absolutely. It freed him up.
So that interest led him to network engineering. He ended up at Beijing University of Posts and Telecommunications, BUPT. And the choice sounds like it was purely based on his thing for computers and games.
Yeah, he admitted BUPT was actually his third priority. He had listed HKU and Fudan higher, but a computer teacher recommended BUPT, so he went with it.
And his time at university seems to reflect that same mixed dedication, but also following his passions.
Totally. Graduated with a high GPA, got a 95 on his thesis, apparently. But he wasn't just a bookworm. He was involved in sports, the class sports commissioner, made the school basketball team. Seems like he spent his time juggling, studying, gaming, and playing basketball. Not really dating, he mentioned.
And the technical stuff he studied there was incredibly broad, looking back. Covered things that might seem totally unrelated now. Everything from, 2G, 3G, 4G, mobile tech, protocols like HTTP,
Nuts and bolts.
to really complex signal processing concepts like Fourier transforms, and then practical coding languages too, Java, C++, A-key, JavaScript.
The real mix.
Now, I have to jump in here. For someone listening who isn't, say, a telecom engineer, how much does knowing old stuff like 3G protocols or Fourier transforms actually help when you end up as a data engineer at Google years down the line? Isn't that tech, obsolete?
That's a really good question, actually. And it gets to the heart of like fundamental knowledge versus specific tools. Sure, 3G protocols themselves are outdated, but understanding how data moves through networks and latency, packet loss, the whole structure of distributed systems, that core understanding is still vital for designing modern cloud systems and data pipelines efficiently.
Okay, I see. The principles transfer.
Exactly. And 4.8 transforms. That's not just jargon. It's a fundamental math tool for analyzing signals. Super useful for things like filtering noise and data, data cleaning, handling time series data. So that broad, deep academic foundation. It gave him options, flexibility later on.
That makes a lot of sense. The specific tech changes, but the engineering thinking stays relevant. Okay, so let's track the next big jump. Heading to Japan for his master's. This decision was influenced, he said, partly by seeing his peers. Apparently 80 or 90% of his parents' friends' kids were also studying abroad. It was becoming the expected thing.
Yeah, bit of a trend. And critically, that financial safety net was there again.
Yeah.
His father offered full support, which took off the pressure to, get a job right away, allowed him to focus on finding a really rigorous academic program. He remembered his dad basically saying, if you want to study, just ask for the money. That lets you aim high.
And he definitely aimed high. Applied to the top two in Japan, right? Tokyo University and Kyoto University.
That's right. He hadn't landed offers from the top 10 U.S. schools he applied to. So the first offer that came through, and it included a full scholarship, was from Tokyo University. He took it.
What's kind of amazing about his arrival in Japan, though, is how he got his language skills.
Oh, this is great. His motivation wasn't purely academic study. It was fueled by watching anime for 3 years during university.
Seriously?
Yeah, he found he could actually follow the dialogue pretty well without any formal lessons. It just cemented his belief that, environment and interest are most important for learning language.
That's kind of the ultimate win for passion-driven learning, isn't it? 3 years of entertainment turned into a massive career advantage.
It really is. But getting into the Japanese graduate system itself, that was anything but relaxed. It sounds pretty high stakes.
How so?
Well, this is important if anyone listening is considering that route. It's usually not a straightforward acceptance into the master's program. Japan often requires this initial period, maybe 3 to 6 months, called kinshusei. It means research student, but it's really more like a probation period.
A trial run, basically. You're not officially in the program yet.
Exactly. You're testing out the lab, the professor's testing you out. And after that period, you have to pass this mandatory, pretty tough entrance exam to officially become a master's candidate.
Wow, okay. And if you fail that exam?
You generally don't move forward. Often means you have to head home. Plus, in FY's specific lab, there was another tough requirement for graduating, publishing at least 2 papers internationally.
That's intense.
Yeah, it's designed for really serious, focused research.
Okay. And his research topic during that intense period actually fed right into his first job, didn't it?
It did. He was looking at GPS positioning for automated vehicles, specifically in dense cities.
Like dealing with the urban canyon effect, where buildings block the signals?
Exactly that. So naturally, that led him into the automotive world. His first job out of grad school was as an embedded software engineer at Panasonic. He was working really close to the hardware controlling car engines, still kind of in that auto research zone.
Right. And this brings us neatly to that first big goal-setting cycle he mentioned. His decade in Japan wasn't just random. He consciously ticked off 3 major goals there.
Yep. Goal 1, secure a job, which he did at Panasonic. Goal 2, achieve permanent residency in Japan. Goal 3, join Google.
He got the first 2 done while still at Panasonic. So let's talk about the pivot, the shift that moved him towards that third goal, Google.
Okay, so the switch from embedded software to data engineer wasn't like he woke up one day and changed careers entirely. It sounds more like an organic evolution, technically speaking. While he was at Panasonic, he worked on developing a patent. It was related to preventing hacks in automated driving systems.
Sure.
And that specific project, he explained, forced him to manage, clean, and process just a massive amount of data system logs, performance metrics, that kind of thing.
Right. But let's dig into the how here. He didn't just think, oh, data seems important. What was it about handling that specific patent data that made him realize he needed to make a full shift?
It sounds like it wasn't just the amount of data, but realizing where the value was being created. See, he was working way down at the hardware control level.
Yeah.
But the real insights, the system vulnerabilities, the future potential, that was all bubbling up from the data layer. So he concluded data should be the future trend. And he made a strategic decision to reposition himself where he saw the most leverage. This wasn't overnight. It was a pivot over, say, a 2-3 year cycle.
Okay, that makes sense. But to make that big a shift into a whole new field like data engineering, he must have needed serious new skills, right? How much of that broad BUPT background was actually useful day to day, and what new stuff did he have to pick up during that 3-year pivot?
Well, the fundamentals helped. Those core programming and algorithm skills. They were definitely reusable, which probably shaved off a lot of learning time. But yeah, he absolutely had to learn the specific tools of the trade for data engineering, modern cloud platforms, distributed systems like Hadoop or Spark, specialized database tech, things you just don't focus on in embedded systems. So that 2-3 year plan he had, it was likely focused on mastering these new tools, probably while still working his Panasonic job.
That's the practical execution piece. Got it. Now, he mentioned another skill he picked up in Japan, one that proved crucial later: the ability to negotiate, deal with clients. He used this really interesting phrase, ichedan dinde. You translated it roughly as the skill of negotiating, or maybe shooting the breeze.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to translate perfectly. It implies a sort of knack for smooth talking, navigating ambiguity, handling discussions effectively, maybe even bullshitting a little when needed, but in a productive way.
Okay, so how does that soft skill, learned in a Japanese corporate setting, end up being useful for like 50% of his Google job in New York? That seems like a big leap.
But this is a real golden nugget, I think. Think about negotiating in Japanese corporate culture. It's often less about aggressive haggling and more about building consensus respectfully. It's about understanding unspoken needs, managing complex situations through really careful communication. You're gathering requirements comprehensively, managing risks subtly.
Right, less confrontational maybe?
Generally, yes. So now, think about his Google role. A data engineer, especially on a client-facing team, often acts as the technical bridge. That 50% client-facing part involves negotiating project scope, timelines, translating fuzzy business needs into concrete technical specs, managing expectations with stakeholders. That nuanced, comprehensive approach developed in Japan, that it's actually the perfect tool set for that kind of complex corporate diplomacy. It means he can take a vague request from a client and turn it into something actionable for his team.
That's brilliant. So the cultural navigation skill becomes a valuable technical requirement in a completely different context. Amazing. Okay, so he achieves his first 2 Japan goals, pivots his skill set towards data, and now sets his sights on the third target, Google.
Mhm. And the push to move to the U.S., it seems, was driven by 2 main things. One was definitely financial. He used the phrase Shanghai, meaning look towards money. A clear desire for better earning potential.
Okay, makes sense.
But he also talked quite openly about sensing a kind of glass ceiling for foreigners trying to climb the ladder in Japanese companies. He saw the U.S. market, and specifically getting an internal transfer within Google, as the clearest path to the kind of upward mobility he felt wasn't quite there for him in Tokyo.
Did the source material mention any, regret about leaving Japan? He'd spent a decade there, built a life, permanent residency. Was the money worth the culture shock, do you think?
It doesn't really dwell on regret, no. The way he executed the move suggests it was a very logical, calculated step. He got that internal Google transfer sorted out in just 6 or 7 months, which is pretty quick.
Right.
It reads like the final phase of a planned operation, not some big emotional wrench. The move itself seems purely strategic, professional.
Right. And now he's in New York, data engineer at Google. He describes having a good work-life balance.
Which he attributes partly to being on an earning money team, a team with leverage inside the company.
And that 50% coding, 50% client-facing role seems to perfectly use that whole blended skill set, the deep tech foundation from BUPT and the masters, plus those communication skills honed in Japan.
And this really brings us back full circle to the core mechanism, his underlying strategy. His go-to approach seems to be, I generally look at what I want to do in the next 2-3 years, and I do that thing.
Right.
He applies this short-term, almost intense focus to pull off these huge global scale changes. He's not getting lost planning for, 20 years out. He's laser focused on the achievable goal for the next 3 years.
It's like the anti-5-year plan. It's the 1,000-day sprint model. So looking back, what's the time machine advice he offers? He mentioned his biggest regret was linked to his parents' influence, that very conservative advice. Ensure you won't fail before trying.
Yeah, that caution is pretty common, isn't it? But he sees it now as potentially holding you back. His current thinking is, if you have some capital, whether it's financial or just a strong social safety net, like parents you could theoretically go home to if things went south, you have to take some calculated risks.
Okay, but hang on. For the average listener, maybe someone who doesn't have that direct parental financial backup, how do they apply that idea? How do you embrace survivable failure without, risking absolute ruin?
That's fair. The principle isn't about being reckless or spending money you don't have. It's more about consciously minimizing the cost of finding out if something works or not. So, for someone without that explicit financial cushion, survivable failure might look like testing ideas in lower stakes ways, like taking on a side project first, doing a 6-month online course instead of a full degree, maybe making a lateral move at work that lets you learn new skills without a huge upfront investment. The key is asking, if this experiment fails, does it completely end my ability to try again? If the answer is no, if the cost of failure is recoverable, then his point is you should probably try it.
That reframes risk quite a bit, doesn't it? It's not about avoiding a failure, but managing the cost of it. And the absolute core advice he gives, the main takeaway for you listening, it loops right back to that central philosophy.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to set that medium-term 3-year goal.
That's the crux of it. He's really emphatic about this. And interestingly, he says the specific content of the goal almost doesn't matter as much as just having one. It could be about money, sure, or getting a specific qualification, or even a personal goal, like getting married or finding a partner. The point is simply that a goal provides great motivation. Without that clear target to shoot for, he warns, you just risk getting stuck, settling for the status quo. He used the term igoya, yuan di tabu, which basically means treading water or just standing still, not making progress.
So we've traced this pretty incredible path from a network engineering student in Beijing to an embedded software guy in Tokyo, picking up critical soft skills alongside hard data experience.
And finally landing as this high-impact data engineer in New York. This whole decade seems shaped by these intentional, step-by-step, goal-driven moves across both jobs and countries. And I think the big takeaway for you, the listener, is just how powerful that approach can be. Breaking down huge ambitions like moving across the world or changing fields into these defined, high-focus 3-year sprints. If you stop trying to map out the entire climb up the mountain and just commit fully to conquering the next visible peak, maybe the long-term view starts to take care of itself.
It's a compelling model. And just as we wrap up, FY leaves us with this really provocative final thought, something that kind of complicates the whole narrative of relentless career chasing. Despite hitting that major U.S. goal, getting the Google job, the New York opportunity, he actually suggested he might end up retiring back in Japan someday.
Yeah, quite a twist at the end. And his reasoning, simply. Life in Japan is much better than in the U.S., in his view.
Wow.
Which really forces you and us to pause and question the whole journey, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He chased professional success, financial gain, all the way to New York.
But his ultimate aspiration maybe is the quality of life, the balance he found back in Japan. So for you listening, it raises this really interesting paradox to mull over. How do you balance that drive for maximum career achievement, maximum financial return with what you actually want in terms of day-to-day comfort, quality of life? How do you define your ultimate success?
Which city or which lifestyle represents your ambition right now? And which represents where you ultimately want to land? Something to think about until our next deep dive.